15. So. Well, let's get started because I'm going to cover a lot today. And please remember, just interrupt me verbally. Don't use the chat when I'm doing the presentation because I can't see it well. So just interrupt me. This is we're here together. This is a casual thing and you're here to learn. So if you get to a point and you're like, I have no idea what you were talking about, let me know, or if you can't see something. So let's just dive in because I'll be doing some demos as well. We'll be pausing for
good.
Oh, and I always forget, just for the recording, I have to spotlight myself. And there's always the possibility a tree will fall on one of the main grid power lines out here. What happens is it gets too much snow and or whatever. And then if I lose power, I don't have a backup on this setup. So I'll either get back on with my phone, and then I'll just have to say we'll reschedule, because if we lose power, we've got kind of an emergency going and we're going to have to like turn on our
deal with it.
Yeah, because you can't let your pipes freeze here. So, okay, let me try again. Hopefully no power outage. Great. Okay, so can you guys now see the
yes.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yes.
This is going. Yay. Okay, this is our last get together, but not your last chance to communicate with me. It's an ongoing thing, so don't worry. If you have questions in the future, of course, keep in touch. So we'll be doing color, the mapping and diagramming, which is so much fun. And then I think kind of one of the most important things is not to kind of that last week where I want to talk about, don't get so tied up in planning a page that you kill the joy of journaling, because it can get very fraught. And that happened to me when I was starting out. I just got way too tied up in fancy stuff. So just as reminders, last time we'll be dropping in here to keep your pledges in mind, that you're going to try to make quiet time for your journaling without the distraction of phones and computers and things. And you're trying to do it regularly. I'll show you just a little entry I'm going to do today, which is just one little observation. And that's all I need to do, aside from the fact that I'm not going outside. And then to remember that while we are trying to put art and drawing into our journals, it's not perfect. And it is, though, perfect drawing practice. So that's why we journal. So we have to let go of that idea that we have to make a perfect picture every time, because your journal's where you're practicing. And it's okay not to do this all the time every day, even though I bug you to, because that is also how we establish a practice. So it's a trade-off, but don't be hard on yourself. I think that's very, very important. And then staying true, remember the positive energy, staying true to your quiet time, that left brain that wants everything to be perfect. Stay true to it. Don't batter it, but make sure that you feed it something to make it happy. Staying true to yourself is that don't be hard on yourself. And then humanity, get together with other journalers, which you're doing now. So color is something I know is so attractive, and we all want to do it, and we all want it to be perfect right away, and it's really not easy. So I have developed this system of simplicity that I developed because I struggled for years. I actually stopped for a year after I started journaling and adding color and sketches, because I made it too complicated. I had too many colors in my palette, I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't have time to take extensive classes. And besides, most of the classes I looked into was much more focused on studio art and not sitting on like this picture, at a waterfall 3 miles up a difficult trail. How do I do that? How do I do this outdoors and not just crash and burn, which I did. And so this is the system that I came up with. So it works for me. It may not work for you. Don't worry if it doesn't. There's loads of different ways to do it. And you may be a lot more coordinated than I was trying to figuring out all these colors. And we'll talk about that. But I like to say, if you're going to spend money on tools, buy fewer things and good stuff than a whole bunch of cheap stuff. Because good stuff will help you achieve better results. And I own a lot of different brushes, but I only ever use either this Isobase Squirrel simple pointy brush or the water brush. That's all I use now, even though I own lots of. But if it makes you happy and you want to carry all those, then do it. I use so that I can walk and hike and journal at the same time. I use these little palettes that slip behind. I'll show you what they look like to hold my kit. So you can make your own easily out of the coroplast, the signage. This is like the stuff they make signs on the roads, the political signs from. You can buy a simple kit, I think, for make your own signs at Ace Hardware for, I think it's $25-$30 or something, and for big sheets, and you can cut them. Or if you want something more that does a lot more, I use plexiglass now, because you can draw on it, make grids, and use it as a viewfinder. You can mix paint on it and stuff like that. You could do that on the coroplast too. And here's how they work. So they slip behind your journal pages, so you can see as I'm standing or sitting, I have everything right there. This is the first one I did, the coroplast. I actually made it so it folded. Don't need to do that anymore. I decided that didn't work. And I actually you can cut a hole for a little jar of water. And then if you use a metal palette, you put magnet tape. You can get a roll of magnet tape for $10 or so. Works great. So that's how I do the on-the-go journaling. I do say, as you saw in the book, if it's a much better to go with, start with colored pencils or watercolor pencils rather than buying a cheap set of paint. And I will talk about why. And it's because it's not pure pigment paint. That's really cheap stuff, like the $10 palettes at Michael's that come with 15-20 colors. It's got a lot of filler in it. It's not pure pigment, so it's not going to mix colors well. And if you blend them together, you often will get very disappointing results. So pure pigment, actually, those tubes, although they're like, that's $12, but oh my gosh, they last for a year or more, unless you're really doing a ton of watercolor. So what I talked about in the book is super important just for understanding color. And this isn't a full class in color. I do like a 2 to 4 hour class in color and color theory and stuff. So this is just introductory here. So when we talk about the primary colors, we've all been taught probably, and it's still taught, and I still see it everywhere, is that yellow, blue, and red are primary colors. But I need to get across, when we're talking primary colors, that's not the right way to think of it. So think of primary colors are the source of all other colors. You can't mix primary colors from any other colors. And the three, and you see the cyan, magenta, yellow, if you've been involved in the printing industry, or you see the phrase CMYK, that's cyan, magenta, yellow, and K is black. So that's how everything that's printed, magazines, whatever, at a printer, they have reservoirs of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And every color that's you see in a magazine is mixed from these 3 colors. So super interesting and cool. And what those are generic terms whenever we're talking about the paint that we buy, because there are different blues that you can use as your cyan, different magentas, different yellows. So I use those generically, but you can intermix them. And the main thing we'll talk about too is that these are pure pigment colors, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. These are not mixed colors. So looking at the color wheel, we had you were practicing these. When you talk about your primaries, cyan, magenta, yellow, you can see there cyan, magenta, yellow. You practice mixing your secondaries, which are the blend of the 2 adjacent primaries. So cyan plus magenta equals purple. Cyan plus yellow equals green. And magenta plus yellow equals orange. And then what we call tertiary colors are the myriad colors in between. So purple, a more purpley blue has more cyan, whereas if you have a reddish purple, like an eggplant, that's got more magenta than blue. So that's tertiary colors. Likewise, you have orangey reds or really, really yellowy oranges, and like really light yellowy green versus a very blue green, or even a turquoise is going to be like almost pure cyan with a tad of yellow kind of thing. So those are tertiary colors. And then another important thing to just to understand, so you don't have to get too far in the weeds on this, but it helps you understand, is that watercolors have different characteristics. So one important one is there are transparent watercolors and there are opaque watercolors. And opaque is on a spectrum as well. So there's, like, this is cadmium yellow here. You can see I drew a black line and then I painted over the line. And when I painted over this one, you can see it obscures the line more than here. This is very transparent yellow. This is areolan yellow, and so on. So an opaque watercolor is not going to mix a pure, really, really bright color. It's going to be a little more muted. They're very strong, beautiful colors. You can see how beautiful that yellow is. So that's an important characteristic just to know, and that every time you buy a good quality watercolor, it tells you if it's transparent or opaque. Then lifting colors and staining colors we talked about. So I love lifting colors because when you make a mistake, they're easier to fix, because that means that it doesn't stick to the paper as strongly as a staining color. So you can re-wet it and lift it. You can also make clouds from the blues. See how when this was wet, I used a tissue to dab the color, and it lifts off. And if I had wet this, I can also lift off quite a bit. So you can see which ones have really good lifting. This one, which is a phthalo blue, is very staining, and so forth. So that's a very staining color. And then we don't get into this heavily because, again, this is a beginner's thing that we're doing. And this is a little more advanced, but be aware that in the watercolor world, there are warm colors and cool colors. And so, for example, here are 3 blues. Here's a very warm blue, meaning it tends more toward the warm end of the spectrum, where this is a very cool blue. This is my favorite blue here. And this is a very cool blue. And again, the characteristics sheets from your artist watercolors will tell you if it's where it lays. So here are my favorites. I like the transparent and lifting ones that are mostly cool, plus a warm dark blue and a warm earthy red. And I'm going to show you what they are. So my favorite yellow is actually a neutral yellow, meaning it's neither really, really cool or really, really warm. Here's a very warm yellow under it. You can see the difference. Warm meaning it's got a little tiny bit more orangey in it. And it's called aureolin. And we'll come back to what these numbers mean in a minute. Manganese blue hue is my favorite cool cyane color. And then my warm blue is a dark andanthrone. My favorite magenta color is quinacridone rose. And then a warm earthy red, my favorite is a burnt sienna. And then what about that number? That's to let you know. So literally this is the pigment color classification for the International Pigment group. You know, they've assigned this to every single pigment. So this might be called aureolin in Daniel Smith colors, but it might be called, I can't remember who else, it might be called cobalt yellow and another brand like Holbein, something like that. But if you look at this is like species and genus. PY is pigment yellow, number 40. It's the same paint, period. And it's a pure pigment. If you look down here at andanthrone blue, this is actually a blend, meaning it's pigment blue number 60 with pigment black, BK, number 6. But every other color here is a pure pigment. So PB is pigment blue 15. There are other brands that have the same PB15, but it's called something else. Like it's like the common name and the genus and species name, you know, there's what, 10 different honeysuckles. They're all different genus and species, but we call them the same common name. So it's similar to that. PB15 is what it is, period. Quinacridone rose and then burnt sienna pigment. They call this pigment brown, PBR, which is interesting, number 7. Okay, so that's pretty advanced stuff, but it's good to know so that when you have struggles with paint that you buy, you might not have realized, oh, I'm trying to mix. Say you bought like this gorgeous phthalo turquoise or something like that. Well, and you're having trouble mixing it, or it has a strange reaction with another color that you thought you were going to get something out of it. It's because it's got multiple colors already in it, and you need to know what those are. That's why like Hooker's green is already, it's a mix of yellows and cyans already to go, and it's going to be this somewhere in here. So it's really good just to know, like I always teach, is I want to know why something is the way it is. And therefore, then once I learn that, I can understand the behavior a lot better. So the reason why I like the transparent and cool color is that there's less chance of mud. They're more harmonic. And I like the lifting colors because it's good for beginners. When you make a mistake, you can literally go, oh crap, and lift it off your page really quick. So keeping a Kleenex handy is good. And then here's, so looking at all the different mixes, what we didn't talk about was super cool is that your pure cyan, magenta, and yellow all mixed together makes beautiful browns. And if I add a little more magenta, then I get a much more like earthier reddish brown. Likewise, more of the blue, the cyan, I'm going to get a much richer black tone brown. So it's really fun to experiment. And then we'll practice these two. Is your burnt sienna plus the dark andanthrone will make a full range of pure black to lovely grays. And almost any reddish color that's a pure color And blue, you can experiment with getting different grays and blacks. Some won't go pure black, but again, that's your, like if I did my magenta and my cyan, I can get some really pretty grays, but I'll get there faster with my burnt sienna and warm blue. And we'll take a look at that. And here's, so just to demonstrate, here's some colors like the cyan colors. I like the manganese blue hue, but cobalt makes a lovely cyan. It's the similar, it's not the same PB color, but it's close. There's also quinacridone magenta and magentas and lots of different ones you can get. I would not, for your picking your primaries though, remember to go with a pure pigment color, not a blend. And then Aureolin is my favorite yellow, but Hansa yellow is another great primary yellow. Okay, let's do our first poll. We're going to launch them. Where'd they go? My polls are missing. Okay, hold on. There they are. All right. I'm launching your first poll. What are the true primary colors? Haha. Unless you haven't had your caffeine, hopefully you can answer this. And someone may have stepped away. So we have 7 of 8. There, yay. So the true primaries, so I'm going to end the poll and then share the results. So someone said blue, red, and yellow, but that's not right because red is not a true primary color because you can make red from magenta and yellow, but we can't make magenta. So cyan, magenta, yellow is our true primaries. We're going to talk about the difference between primaries and triads because you can have a lot of fun with different triads. But what I'm talking about are true primaries, what other colors are built from. So that was fun. Okay, stop that one and go back to. Any questions so far before I go back? Okay, we're going to keep motoring on and enter some new territory. Let's see. Okay. Now I need to get this going. There we go. Okay. We did that. Whoops. So with these, just this basic primary palette plus the 2 extras, my extras being the burnt sienna and the indanthrone blue, look at the range of things that you can make. From the darker green to the light greens, from these beautiful browns to the pure blacks. All of these came from that one little tiny limited triad palette. Or you can even create iridescence, or look at the light, beautiful orangey color versus the pure pink. Very, very fun there. Very, very versatile. Here you can see pure red was magenta with a little yellow. And then the black is, here's some of the burnt sienna plus some of my blue made the pure black. So really interesting how, what a full range you can get with just that little limited palette. So jumping into, you've been sketching, you've been doing some great landscape toes. So adding color, this was, I took a class from Mark Taro Holmes. I love his teaching technique. He's not a nature journaler. He's very well known in the urban sketcher movement. And I loved his technique of this tea, milk, and honey. And it just changed it for me, where instead of just diving in and putting everything down at once, he teaches to start with the lightest colors like your light sky, and then doing a wash of the undertones. This is classic painting technique, but it works really well for field sketching too. Putting that the watery, less pigment is how we think of it. So tea, as opposed to milk, which is really dense. So the tea you can see through. So very light color. And then he says, now add the milk to your tea. So you put your medium tones next over that. And then finally, the darkest darks, which he likes to liken to honey. It's thicker color. It's got tons of pigment in it. And you want to use it fairly sparingly. So hopefully you were able to experiment with that and see how. So I did this really challenging landscape. This was like very first things I did after following Mark's technique, and I liked the way it worked to tackle a difficult landscapito. In the field, this was in Mexico. So I always have to remind myself this one, though. That's why I include in the book. Yeah, I include in the book like something you can actually cut out. It's like, put this in your journal. Stop. The best way to ruin watercolor is to overwork it. I do it all the time. I mean, I ruin it all the time. I think, no, I don't have an example with me of one I feel like I overdid. I almost overdid one. I'll show you, but it was fun. I was with my husband and he was like, stop. Don't go back. You want to keep going back and adding and noodling and fixing. Watercolor sits on your paper. The pigment sits on the paper. And the more you move those pigment particles around, you're messing up their relationship with each other. Like maybe that first time you dropped it in was really great. If you keep re-wetting and changing it or adding things, it starts to turn muddy and blah. So it's better to stop, wait a day, go back, look at it, try not to mess with it, or just be very, very cautious at what you're going to do. So some tips that are really, really recommend are to remember that watercolor is water plus color, and you can control it. So you have to learn to get a feel for how much pigment, the color, is in your water. And if you end up with really anemic looking pages that are too pale, you're probably using not enough pigment or too much water. If you get really like you have a really too much pigment, you put it down and then you add something on it and it blows it out really badly. That's another problem of maybe too much pigment, and then when you add water on top of it, it blooms and forces it away. Sometimes you want that, and I'll demonstrate that, but a lot of times too much pigment can be a problem too. However, stronger color is usually better than timid color, because I see a lot of beginners will come to me and say, I really hate my watercolor, and we'll take a look, and it's because it's really, really pale. You're timid, you don't want to get your brush in there and mix a really soupy, vibrant thing. So that's a little, just practice. You just practice a little bit more color. Having fun and not being too rigid about don't color in the lines. You can see I try to just relax and let my watercolor be pretty splashy, because first of all, I'm in the field. I can't be perfect. I don't want to be perfect. I want to relax and enjoy myself. I love doing the color. So I don't sweat it if I go out of the lines or blork or something. So just have fun. I do like to say, when you're first learning, stick with some good paper that you like and good paint, and stick with that combination for a while until you feel really like you can speak that language. If you keep changing your paper, and I'm experimenting, trying to find new paper right now because my favorite paper went out of production. I'm finding it hard when I start journaling on a new paper. I don't know that language yet. I don't know how my pigments work on that paper. So I have to learn that. So remember that if you're bouncing around between a lot of different journals and you're struggling, it might be because you just have to know your pen and pencil behaves differently on different paper. as does your watercolor or your pencils, your color pencils. It's just, you have to learn that. So when starting out, get to know your language first. So
Can I ask a quick question?
absolutely.
What is the paper that's in the book? The watercolor paper in the back that we've been doing our studies on. What is that paper?
Yes, it's from Speedball. I ordered that special, and it's their Bianfang 90-pound paper, watercolor paper. And I can send you a link of what that is. It's a good beginner's paper, really good paper. It's very forgiving and it takes water well without too much drama. And then just remembering there are no rules, except have fun. There's some strong, maybe there's one rule we like, but I won't call it a rule. It's just a guideline. So another couple of tips, if one thing I love to do is to add what I call a color palette of the landscape I'm in. So here's a color palette of just sitting by that waterfall. I just looked around and said, oh, here's, the beautiful the nice rock at GNEISS nice rock has these white and blue grays, and then also really rusty colored rock, and then the Christmas cactus has had this magenta thing going on. The wild cotton leaves had turned this rusty red. Grasses were very warm yellow. The ash trees are still bright yellow. The saguaro cactuses are beautiful green, and then actually that's a piece of real mica because everything's all glittery there. So it's fun. So you can do that. It's a really fun way to play with color, learn to mix your colors to get those new colors. And it's really a fun thing to do. And then we talked about opaque watercolors and the fact that there's a different spectrum. So like a cadmium yellow is a pretty medium opaque yellow, but a full-on totally opaque watercolor is called gouache. And this is a little gouache painting. You can see how you can use the whites and the other colors to lay on top of other colors, and it's not transparent at all. So it's great for doing these fun highlights and skies and things. But also I used it to fix a major problem here. I think I showed you this last time I was sketching in the Museum of Natural History in London. I was very distracted because some people were watching me draw over my shoulder. So I completely forgot the fin. Later, I was like, oh my God. So I painted gouache over it and fixed it. So you can do that with gouache. That's a great tool. So I keep several tubes of gouache. You can actually mix primary colors from gouache too. So I just carry a blue, a yellow, and a magenta, and I can mix colors with my gouache, and a white. And white's my favorite for fixing or for adding highlights and things. And then just to remind you too, so you can experiment with other triad colors. These aren't primary colors, but other yellows, blues, and magenta-y reds or reds. Here's a palette that I play with that has lapis lazuli, a yellow ochre, a red ochre. Those are my go-to. These greens were created with lapis and yellow ochre and a Mayan blue, which is another. These are all soil or plant-based pigments. Super cool. So you get that blue green there and the bright greens, but these are all done with just these three colors. Pretty fun to play with. And there's a woman named Jane Blundell, Blundell, janeblundell.com. She's Australian, is the queen of color mixing and has a fabulous website on explaining colors. Pretty much everything I learned about color came from Jane's website. And she loves to put together what she calls limited palettes. So just 3 colors. And it'll be a blue, a reddish color, and a yellow color. And really fun. You won't get pure primary colors. We're not talking primary, but they're called triads or limited palettes. It's super fun to play with. So we're going to go do poll number 2. And then I'm going to do a demo on some techniques, especially the edge pulling and then the wet on wet, wet on dry. And if we have time, we'll play with mixing color, the blacks and grays live. So let's go to poll number 2. Okay. What is the most important rule for adding color? I think I had fun with these. Yay. Okay. One more person. Yay. Okay. You all got it right. Everybody said, stop. Don't overwork it. Yeah.
Well, and I was attempting to paint something on Friday, and you know, how was this? And all of a sudden I heard your voice in my head say, don't overwork it. And I put the brush down and walked away.
Good job.
I'll show you mine, and just actually I can do it right now because I'm going to switch to the overhead. So let me show you where I almost overworked this. Okay. See. So this is, move this over. This is the landscape I did, you know, at the waterfall. Come on, let's make it a little higher. Sorry about that. I'm just making it a little higher. There we go. This is the landscape at the waterfall. And let me get a little better exposure. There we go. I came very close to adding too much detail because it was an incredibly complex scene with tons of rocks and plants, and I was starting to try to drop in every single thing that I was seeing. And once I stopped and pulled back, I was happy. If I was tempted to go back in and add more detail here, but that would have made that pop forward, because a lot of detail means it's closer. So it's better to put your most detail in the closer things, the focal points, and then let the rest fade. So that was a good lesson. Another thing I'm going to show you too that I did here color-wise, this is a good example of I used glazing. So colors over colors in a, I put down the yellow, and then I glazed wet watercolor over dry watercolor to create these varied colors in the leaves that were just starting to go to bright yellow. It still had a little green in it. So I'll demonstrate that as well. And then that, some of you saw,
Yes.
this technique, it was wet on wet, because I wanted this to blend really, really well.
Can you explain how the trees, it looks like you used your pen to outline the trees in the background behind the ones that are right there in the foreground. They look very detailed, but they've been washed out, blended in. And I was wondering how you did that.
I will demonstrate it.
Perfect.
That's a really good thing to demonstrate. So let's start with that one. I also have a leaf prepared to do a painting over, so it's already dried. But let me show you what it would look like. No, I want to get this closer. So and try to get rid of some of these shadows. I'm not in my haven't really set up the camera system here. I'm going to turn off my overhead light. Hope that works a little better. A little brighter. Just want to get my exposures. So the way I did those trees, and I've been practicing snowy trees. As you can imagine, growing up in the desert, I don't have a lot of experience with snowy trees. So it's been fun. But so I would do the main trees that were in the foreground was you do your snowy bits first, and then I'm drawing the needles coming out with the dark around the snow to emphasize the snow bits. And the snow up here, was really sitting on the tops of the boughs. And whenever you want to emphasize something like snow, you need to make sure you have a dark under it that emphasizes the way the light and dark work together. So the needles coming out. So probably made this too big. I'm going to go really fast because we want to focus on the snow. The full demo. But so that is how I would do say the snowy tree. This is a different species. There, and then to do the really light ones, they're farther away and they're smaller. And so with just a tiny bit of, I'm barely scratching my pen as a marker, and to just give me an outline of far away trees. And I would go in, I can show you, I went in and I filled it in with almost a gray blue. Just barely, I'm just barely running the pen over the textured paper. So then I would maybe do dark trees in front, like I did on the, yeah. And then to do the wet on wet, now let's play with that. Hopefully that's, remember to use a spray of water if you're using a little palette with not fresh paint. This is dried paint, so you want to wake that up. And let me bring my water in.
You spray the palette?
Yes, so I just sprayed this.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is, the way I did this before is with clear water, you paint around what you want. I'm wetting the paper around the subject because watercolor is going to flow into the wet. And when it hits that edge of dryness, it will stop. So I'm making this wet. Now, we're up in the far north. I'm going to use yellow because that's how my sun rises. And you see if I'm dropping it in here, it's going to go stop at those hard edges. And I'm working fairly fast because now I want to lay in some of that pink magenta. And I'm making it pretty watery. Because I'm barely going to touch them together here. So they start blending. This is wet and wet. And now I'm going to drop in the blue at the top. Now this is drier at the top, and they're just barely going to meet because there really wasn't a ton of purple. And remember, if my blue and my magenta meet too much, they're going to turn pretty dark purple. There, you see what happened there?
Yeah.
A little bit too much in there, which I can go in now. I dried off my brush, I squeegeed it out. Oops, see how lifting that is? You have to be careful. Might just leave it. Otherwise, I'm moving those pigment particles, see? That's gonna wreck that. So you just kind of like let it go. Because wet on wet, as soon as I disturb this, it's going to mess it up. And then to get that, the pretty icy blue. So snow actually has a lot of blue and other colors in it. So I'm going to go in and right now that I'm using just dry, wet on dry here, but you might want to do wet it all first with water. I added the dark blue here for a shadow under the tree. So I think I got too much blue, so I'm going to actually lift it out. There. So I'm going to let that dry. This will dry a lot lighter than it's showing right now. And that's why sometimes you have to let things dry. So while that's drying, we can go demonstrate. So this is dry. And I'm going to demonstrate glazing, which is wet over dry. Because what I want to do is, in nature, a fall leaf isn't 100% pure yellow usually. I want more variation. So I'm going to take, believe it or not, the cyan, the blue, manganese blue.
Make it green.
And it's going to pull a green. And just, it's really cool how, and I'm actually going to make it not perfect. I want to soften that edge, but I'm going to let a little bit of that yellow show through. Let me do a really darker one on the other side so you can see what that would look like. So more blue. See how that makes a really pretty green? And it's nicely what I call variegated. So it looks more natural. Isn't that interesting? You get a beautiful, beautiful colors that way. So that's glazing when you put a wet over a dry. Where up here I was blending wet and wet. So say I wanted to What else? Oh, yes, the edge pulling is another wet technique. So say I've got my some pine trees. I'm just gonna do a little landscapey toe here and some shrubs things here. And I've got, this is not a snow landscape. So here's, I did a little landscape there. One fun thing you can do, which I enjoy doing a lot, let's see. I'm going to mix you need a pretty dense color here. I'm going to do a dark green. One tip, I don't know if we've talked about this, but these are both my same yellows, and I call this my dirty yellow. This is the yellow, it's the same yellow. But this is where I can blork into it and not worry. And then I always have my pure pretty yellow. So edge pulling is, so say I'm putting a super thick wad of color here. You see that? Okay. Now I'm rinsing out my brush and getting just water. There's no color on the brush. And I'm just touching the edge of that. And it makes a really pretty, but you have to have enough pigment. But then you get this really pretty effect there. Come on. There. And that's called edge pulling, which is a fun thing to do when you want to have a nice flow look, and works well on landscapes. I'm trying to think what else we would use it on. You would use it, say, if you were doing, say we had you were doing a fruit or something. This is going to be edge pulling with paint. But I mean, with paint, with ink, sorry. So you can do the same thing with your ink. Or I could have done it with paint.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. This is waterproof paint, so I have a very short window.
Waterproof ink, you mean? Yeah.
I mean, ink, thank you. I have a very short window where I can pull it like that. But then when it dries, I can't move it again. So kind of fun technique.
Yeah.
So you can use ink, you can use it with paint. Either way, it's called edge pulling.
Cool.
And that's a fun, quick way to do things. So the other thing we want to play with, any questions about these techniques?
Oh, it's really interesting.
So, if I wanted to say I wanted to go in here and emphasize more where the sun was, like the sun is much more like this saffrony yellow. Must be you know what I'm learning now? I'm going to look up something. I'm looking at my sun right now. I'm learning my Arctic sun. I think the sunrise, let's see. Interesting. We must have clouds because I'm just not getting the sun today. And I can't see if I have clouds or not. So say I want a more orangey. So now I took the pure yellow. I'm adding little magenta to make a much more orangey color. And if I want that sun, say I want more of that, then I want the sun to be like here. I would get this damp with pure water. Damp, not soaking wet. So that's dry. So now I'm re-wetting, and I'm going to drop in the orangier color. Now it's very,
Oh,
very diffuse. To sort of approximate the glow of the sun coming.
yeah.
I might even add a tiny bit more glow there. You see how when I drop it, it just starts
Yeah.
fusing. So the wetness was necessary. If I want a hard edge, then I would, let me just show you what a hard edge looks like. End up ruining this, but there, I mean, it doesn't go anywhere. That's a hard edge.
Right. That's wet on dry.
Or yes, exactly. But if I wet this first and drop it in, it's going to be a soft edge, or it's gonna bloom
Mm-hmm.
like so. So just keep experimenting with that, and have fun. But you can see now as the leaf dried, the different effects you get, and you can add more. So what would happen if I added magenta over that green? What do you think will happen?
Over the green,
Uh-huh.
closer
Any
to
guesses?
brown. Brownish.
Exactly. That's a really fun way to pull out fall colors.
Oh yeah.
But what you get is the hint of what the leaf looked like before. You'll get some of the reds and the browns and the greens. Just experiment. It's pretty fun. The more magenta, the richer it will be. That fall color thing. So you can have a lot of fun with that. So
So if you had lighter surface features of the leaf that you wanted to put into like that darker area, then you would use gouache or something like that to go over the top, or how would you introduce like lighter features?
That's one way. I do mention this in the book. There's a fun, really quick, that you can use an artist tool called Frisket, which is a resist. It actually is something you paint on that you would want to reserve the yellow. So say the leaf has yellow splotches, which we often see that in leaves that are turning, right? Or say that. So this is dry. Then there's something called Frisket, which is a paint on, it's like rubber cementy kind of stuff, because
Right.
you paint it on and then it dries, and then you paint over it and then you pull it off. But one of the things I like to use is wax paper. Make sure I got the right one here. So I forgot to mark which side.
Are they both wax on both sides of the paper?
No, only one side is, and I forgot to
Okay.
mark which one. I usually write it on there. So let me, there, this is the correct side. So say we've got like splotches. I put it down so the wax side is down, and let's say there's yellow splotches. I'm creating yellow splotches or dots. You can also do it with veins. Let's see if I got the right, one. So now let me paint the cyan over that.
Oh yeah.
I didn't, you would really want to do it a lot harder than I did, but that more or less reserved the lines. It didn't do the splotches. I think my wax paper is worn out. I need a better one. But it definitely, wax paper is a great way to add resist.
Fast too. You wouldn't have to wait for the other thing to dry.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
that's really
experiment with
cool.
that. Yeah, I think this is too wrinkled and worn out. You need one that's fresh. So I need to get some fresh. That's one way to do it, or use the frisket, or use gouache on top.
Cool.
So for just demonstrating, just going to use the back here. I know some folks said that the grays and blacks are challenging. So we're going to play with that a little. So using the dark blue like in Dan Throne and the burnt sienna, you need a lot of pigment, or fair amount of pigment. Now, see, that diluted it too much. It's actually a gray, not pure black. I'm going to add more of the blue. And you just keep mixing. You see that? Let's take a look at what that looks like on the paper. You can buy, black watercolor called lamp black, things like that, but it tends to be a pretty flat color. And that is a pretty nice black. Mixed blacks have a lot of character. For example, then I'm adding a little more blue. And it's less black now than gunmetal gray, because I added more blue and more water. And now you get a beautiful gray. Or if I added more burnt sienna, see how this, in terms of the gray, it's a much warmer gray.
Yeah.
Very cold gray, whoops, black, cold gray, warm gray. So as you can see, it's just a matter of controlling the pigment and water. And it does take practice. Let me show you what the nice thing is, the harmony too. If you're painting, with these colors in Dan Throne blue, and you create your black from the Dan Throne that's already in your painting, it's harmonious because you're using the same relationship colors. I can create gray from my magenta, my cyan, which is manganese blue, by adding a little of the burnt sienna. So for example, there's a really pretty gray. So I often do that. Say I just did I'm doing a sky with some clouds. This is a very quick and dirty. I don't have any Kleenex handy. Usually Kleenex would be the best, quickest way to pull some clouds here. I'm softening the edges. So one of the quickest way to get some cloud color in is, clouds have gray most always in them, is the same manganese blue with a tiny bit of the burnt sienna. I'm even going to add a little more blue. Oops. What I want to do is wet that cloud with pure water. And now I want to drop in a gray made from the same colors, but pretty watery. It dried so quickly. How funny. I think that our house is so dry. I'm having to soften the edges, but it's much more harmonious.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using very watery grays. To sort of make the puffy clouds. So you can see how that works.
Yeah.
So why we like the harmonious grays are mixed with the colors you're already using. We'll see how that looks when it dries. And then kind of the final fun thing, because brown, of course, occurs in nature a lot, but you don't want 12 different browns in your palette. You'll end up with a palette that's a foot by a foot square. You can create your browns by mixing your 3 primary colors and a whole range in between. So here's your manganese, or your whatever your blue is, your magenta, and your yellow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we start mixing them, you start getting some really interesting browns. So there's a brown. But let's say I wanted it warmer. I add more of the red. Then, here's a real irony dirt brown color. And if I add more yellow, it gets even more kind of like yellowy sand. It's funny, this camera is showing this is much redder than it actually is. If I add more blue, whoops. Now see, I added too much blue. You see what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I got a really cool turquoise green. But I'm gonna have to brown that up. First I add magenta, which, look at that, a really cool warm purple. But as soon as I drop in the yellow, now you see how I'm just keep dropping in colors to get where I want to be. When I added more blue, it got more flat brown.
Mm-hmm.
It's a flat brown. If I add more magenta, it's going to go warmer. And oops, I just dirtied my blue. I mean, my yellow. There's a really rich brown. So you just keep experimenting. But I can generally mix just about any colors I need. I'm just cleaning my yellow.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite quick tricks is, so say you want to do grass, and it's dried grass. If I just use pure yellow, that just doesn't look right. If I drop in the tiniest bit of burnt sienna, that warms up this yellow. So it's no longer super bright, but
More realistic.
more realistic, yeah. Of that dried grass yellow that a lot of us have in landscapes right now. Not up here though. And see, this is wet here. So if I wanted to add maybe more of the burnt sienna to make more of a dirt color down below or something. This, wonder how, let's see, this camera. Interesting. It's just turning everything more red than it is. That's curious. Yeah. So you can see the clouds.
They're beautiful. They look like clouds to me.
Yeah, and it just is a little more harmonious. So here's everything drying up. You can see what the edge pulling, see how fun that is. Then you can actually write in the lighter color as the fun way to create a caption. So any other demos we want to play with before we kind of move on to the last sections? Because we still have 2 more sections to do.
I feel like I've been hogging up the questions, so I'm going to stand back here.
No, don't worry. I'm sure people are like, yeah, I want that too. So let me see. Switch my camera. I'm going to turn on my. Go. Okay. Well, we can always come back. So let's go continue. If we don't have any burning questions, I lost my keynote. Where are you? Oh, I know what's wrong. Hang on. It's still in full screen mode and Zoom doesn't like that. So let me share again now. There we are. Okay. So moving on. I should have done this before I switched. Let's see. That's why I have reminders though, because I get into the weeds on what I'm doing and I forgot I need to do my poll. So next poll. Now I'm going to hold your feet to the fire though. This is week 6. This is the color. So I'm going to give you a moment to answer these. And I'll be right back. I'm going to top up my tea while you guys answer your benchmarks because there's a lot of them on this. Okay, let's see. Still have 2 more people, or someone might have stepped away. 2 more people need to vote. Got 8. Okay, 1 more. No pressure. I can just barely see the sun now. Barely coming up above the horizon line. Okay, I think someone might have stepped away. Or is someone still voting? No.
Marilee looks like she stepped away.
Okay, well, we're going to end. And I'm going to share the results. So, did we practice making colors using a triad? So 2 said not yet. Hopefully you can jump into that if you want to. And 6 of you said, yes, you did. Great. Did you practice any of the techniques? And so that would be yes. Great. All of you did. Did you practice that tea, milk, honey approach? 6 of you did. 2 of you haven't yet. That's good. And how are you finding the color adventures, especially those of you for this is new? Challenging, but fun, good. One person is great. I'm comfortable with color, yay. And middle of the road, good, good, that's great. Color is always challenging, so do not worry. It takes years and years and years of practice. Just have fun with it and don't let it strangle you and get you so frustrated, is kind of the thing. Oh, Gwen's got her kitty. Wonderful. So that's really good. So let's jump back to our next sections, because we're going to add some new stuff. So we did that. So this is a fun part. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because this is kind of a personal thing for everybody, what you choose to do, but the mapping and diagramming, just have fun with it. Hopefully you got into it and you tried some different techniques, just to show you the different ones. You can do tallying literally, because of course mapping and diagramming is representing data either numerically or most of it is numerical. Even a map is numerical, right? Because your maps are based on where you are on longitude and latitude, which is numbers, but numerical can also be. So this fun thing that I tried here was I decided to try to represent visually what birds sound like in terms of frequencies. So low to high. So low frequency sounds, I put low, highest frequency, I put up high, and then how loud they were, and how tall they were, or where they were on the ground. Not tall, where were they in the tree high up? Were they flying? Were they on the ground? And so I tried, those are numbers because, frequency is high or low, altitude, and then just how loud they were. It was really fun to try to do. So for example, VERD is a verdin. These are American Ornithological Union abbreviations for birds. So the verdin, even though he's a little guy, so he was in the middle part of the tree, his sound was like huge for such a little guy. Abert's towhee was the loudest, the yellow, wah, and they were all over. White-winged doves, lowest frequency on the ground, also loud. Lesser goldfinch here and here. And Lucy's warbler, loud little guys. And that was kind of fun to try. So think of the new fun, different ways to visualize things. Another fun project, Jack Laws tries to do this every year. They have a solstice party where you take readings on where the sun is using either a compass and or measuring, you use a stick in the ground and you measure the shadow and angle of the sun, and then you plot it on using degrees drawn in your notebook, which is really, really fun. And you can also do winter. This was winter in Southern Arizona was it 2020? And see the difference, how interesting that is.
How interesting your winter one's going to be this year if you do it.
I'm guessing, I'm looking outside right now. I'm guessing here it would be like, I don't even know if I'll be able to see the sun.
It'll just sort of go across, right?
It'll just kind of peak. It'll just like, I'm going to try to do it. It'll be just like this. Barely. Super fun. So I'm going to do that. So like I said, I wanted to spend more time on the final chapter. So let's check in with how you did with mapping and diagramming. And then at the end, I want to go and I'm going to call up Padlet because I want to share some things that all of you have done. If you haven't had a chance, thank you all who are really going in there. Jill, especially, you've been really pushing us all to share on Padlet. Thank you. There's some really fun ideas in Padlet for some diagramming and different things. So here's our, tell me how you did with your benchmarks on week 7. Did you add a map at least one day? Did you try a movement map? Did you try some other form of data or timing diagram? Anything, just have fun. All right. I think that's all of us who are here. Nope, 9 yay. Okay, let's see, share the results. Okay, did you add a map on at least one day of your week? So 5 of you did and 4 of you didn't. So maps are challenging. Also take a little bit more time, don't they? Did anybody try a movement map? 3 did. 6 of you, no. That's all right. Might have done something else. And did you try some other form of data or timing diagram, anything like the weird bird sound thing that I did or whatever? So you're split about 50-50. I think these are more challenging things to do. Also, just take more time, don't they? So that's good. Hopefully you can keep working on that. I see Gina, surely you're with us today. Gina, are you going to map, you want to do a solstice map with me of the sun? Gina,
I can try and do that.
you're in Anchorage, right?
No, Juneau.
Juneau.
So I have 6.5, a little bit less than 6.5 hours of daylight.
Oh, you've got like 3 more than we do.
Yes.
So that'll be fun to compare. If we can try that, that would be fun. I don't know how much I'll be able to do any sun shots. I would have to go out pretty far out. I've got too many trees around me. So in other words, like I want to take a shot of the sun with a compass to see where it is. So we'll have to see. Okay. Oh, Tina says she just posted her map. Yeah, we're going to go to Padlet, and I'm going to screen share when we get back to that. Hang on. Okay. All right, and now our favorite, the last chapter, kind of a favorite one, and I just lost my Zoom window. Where'd you guys go? There you are. Now, the last one is my favorite kind of chapter. Besides, I think color and this one were my favorite, because the next part is what I call don't overthink it. And this is where I think a lot of nature journalers start getting frustrated. You start out, you're like, oh, this can be great. But I want my pages to be like, oh, amazing. And you start kind of overworking things, overthinking it, maybe trying to do too much all at once on a page or something, and you sort of can kill the joy by overthinking it. So what I'm going to do is share. I'm going to do a demo here. You saw this page last time, example of this. I use this one because it's got so many good examples of like writing questions or using, using metaphors or showing, you don't have to draw a perfect antelope to demonstrate something. So this has been a kind of a favorite page. It's also a good page to show flow. So how did I create this page? This was drawn throughout a day that was spent at Okavango Delta in Moremi Reserve in Botswana. And this was drawn throughout the day. And I'm going to show you what my process was. Did I plan this page totally in advance and go, oh, I'm going to do exactly this. I'm going to put a zebra here. I'm going to put this here. No, I didn't. And here's how I work it, especially when I'm moving around a lot, but I want to record everything that I can. So starting with a blank page, what do I do first? Of course, everybody knows. You do your metadata. That gets us set up in time and place. I do everything that I can. And in this case, the metadata was first thing in the morning. So this was where we started, and maybe the next day will be where we ended. So then I penciled in literally just a column, knowing that was where I was going to write species lists, because I like to do that. So I'm reserving that. I did that second. And then I drew in just a box, because I figured, okay, I'm going to just reserve that for maybe something cool later. And then that gives me a framework now to work from. And then the first thing I did, of course, wrote my first thing in the morning. We stopped for tea, so I wrote this down. Start the prose, that sets the scene. Remember how important that is. And then as we were driving, it's like, oh my gosh, we saw this eagle. I actually didn't identify it, but I did sketch it in and made sure I wrote, oh, it had a crest, it had yellow eyes, it had a dark bill, in a really, really short tail. So later I was able to go back. So I wrote Marshall Eagle question mark, but it was, so that was cool. And then later on after lunch, we observed some zebras, so I was able to mostly do most of the sketch, although I finished the color and everything later at camp. But I knew I wanted a big zebra there because it also was this really interesting, I'd never seen zebras with this brown interstices between stripes, which was really pretty. And then throughout the day, I kept adding to the species list. So that was just an ongoing thing. And then as I went, I filled in things as I went. And did I super plan that page? No. Did it work well? I think it did in the end. By giving myself these parameters, boxes and things, it really worked well. So let's look at some other examples. This is the same region, another day. What about this page works? And what is it about the layout that's like, ooh, this is an attractive page? Well, for one thing, large element, this is almost 2/3 of the page, just under 2/3. It takes up major part. And then a second element, also kind of pulling out a small detail and making it big, is a really pleasing thing to do in a journal. So those are two really major important things. I did this sketch standing in a platform while we were eating lunch, really fast, with just quick pen and watercolor. I knew I was going to put this wild sage in here that I collected a piece. So I kind of sketched a little skeleton outline, but I didn't finish it yet. And then I wrote this. And then a little later in the day, added this part. And in terms of kind of why this works, is this was not a lot of detail, but it was an interesting extra thing to add, just reminding me of what the horns were. And it's two more elements. So there's these two big elements plus two small elements. What would this have looked like if I had done another watercolor sketch right here? I think that muddies it up and makes it too busy. So less is more often, and white space is good. So I think that that's a really great thing to remember. See that? Okay. Here's some other examples. So some things, and I know I saw some of you trying this, harmonious columns or repetition of shapes is another great way, especially when you're starting out. This is 4 columns plus an extra element of pulling these across the bottom. So you end up with, instead of 4 full columns all the way down, Akshay did a single a horizontal column across the bottom. But more importantly from this, and that was a great way to organize these things, and it fits the subject, right? Because it's a tall, skinny thing. But I think more importantly too, is that the white space. If he had filled that whole page up, your eye would be, oh, totally.
Overwhelmed.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Nice little headline there, but he didn't run the headline across, which was a really smart thing to do. And then the eye flows left to right kind of naturally. That's the way in the Western world, at least English and many other Romance languages and many languages do flow left to right. Some languages do not. They would flow quite differently. So you would plan things maybe a little differently if you're working in another language. Another great example of columns plus what I call repetition of shapes. Love the way Pat did this with the just the shapes and repetition, dark, 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 really fun. Just love the way this one worked. Not hard to do, easy to plan ahead, but you're not stuck, you're not being super, super anal about it. Circles, don't forget, lots of different shapes are fun. This was a project Kate Rudder gave a presentation called the 10X project, which was really, really fun, where you take a subject and you zoom out. You can do it the opposite way if you want to zoom in, but you zoom out 10 times. So I started with, in my yard, the spine of an agave Americana, and then zoomed out a level, zoomed out a level, zoomed out a level.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and you keep zooming out. So, there's our little yard in Tucson. Then here's my neighborhood in Tucson. And then here's the neighborhood. Yeah. At state level, at regional level, continent, and then in the planet. So that's a really, really fun
Totally
to do. Yeah. And then the flow is such that, harmoniously you have one bigger thing, and then you have others are all equal size, but they're spaced in a way that's pleasing with the headline. Another thing Bill Singleton recommended, I love this idea, is in the back of his journal. He keeps like little layout cheat sheets, like, oh, maybe this, you reserve this shape and then you write here, or you do a circle with the writing and you do your drawings around it. There's no right or wrong or whatever. You just make up your own little vignettes or what have you. And maybe it's a reference sheet you keep in the back and go, oh, maybe I'm at the ocean, and maybe I use this one because the wave is going to do this, and I write around the wave. How cool would that be? Really fun ideas, because I think we get gripped a lot of times when we go out and we're like, oh my God, I want to do something amazing. And then you're like, oh my God, all I can do is write, or I can't think of a thing. So cheat sheets are really a great idea. And then someone asked about this because we mentioned indexing. So this is my desk in Tucson. My pages lace into my leather journal. And then for the last 30, almost 40 years, I've been archiving them. And these are simple 3-ring binders with labels of the dates. But how would I find what I need in my dozens of journals? So this is how it works. Oh, back to here. These are my indexes. Okay, so here I am at the start of the year 2021. Here's last year's index, and I've just created a new index. And this is what they look like. So I use a little mini field notes notebook for my index, and it's 1 year, one index. January 1st is always page 1. So how I index, and I'm not super anal about this. I don't do every single subject or word, but things that I think are keywords, and you just have to sort of get used to it, or develop your own, whatever your interests are. But So each page, here are the R's, here are the S's. So for example, river, and then this little code means page 50. And since it's 2020, I know that's page 50 of 2020 notebook. And it's January 1st. No, I'm sorry. 01/22, January 22nd. This is page 99, March 22nd. Raven is on page 54, which is February 6th, and so forth. And then maybe once a month, every couple of months, I'll go through my pages and add these in. So Tina, just talk verbally. Shoot with your question.
Yeah, right here on your page. So you come back and once you've done your journal book and come back and do this, or do you do this first?
So the index, I keep adding to the index every month or so. So at the end of a month, I'll pull out my little index book, and I keep a little cheat sheet of where I stopped the last time. So it's like I keep a little note in the front of my journal saying the last time I indexed was, and I'm pretty sure right now the last time I indexed was September. So I've got some months to make up. So I'll need to go pull out my September pages, October pages, November pages, and now December, and quick go through them and index them.
So it's easy for you to go and look under the R's when you're looking for something for that year. Is that how you do it by alphabet?
I do it by alphabet. So say
Yeah.
say I want to know when I did entries on Lucy's warblers. So I would go to the W's, and I just being with a science background, I'll go warbler, Lucy's, so that I can go see all my warblers are under W. But you don't have to do it that way. It's whatever works for you.
Yeah, no, but that seems a good way to find something for that year, in my mind, the alphabetical resource for that, and to note the page in that journal. So would you have, obviously you would have more than one journal for that year. Obviously you have quite a few journals for a year.
So this is my journal, and the pages are replaceable.
Right.
So I'll show you in just a second. I can go back to my camera. I keep removing and adding pages. So for example, one of these journals here might be, or excuse me, binders. The binder is a whole year, so it could have between 100 and 250 pages in it. I never run out of journal pages because I use a refillable journal. It's just never ending. That's why I page number and I index. If I were using a bound journal, I would approach it the same way, and this bound journal would simply have the date on the spine of what dates it spans. So it could be April to July, or it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years. It just depends on how much journaling you did. Does that make sense? So this works whether you use 3-ring binders or a pre-made journal.
Yes, thank you.
So you can see here, I just do entries for sparrow. So sage sparrows, white-crowned sparrows, etc. That way, and I do place names too. So I don't see one on here, but so if I went to a specific place, I would want to write that too. So I think that's it for this section, and then we'll have time to go look at Padlet and some other things, but let's check in with our last benchmarks and see how everybody did. And it's a busy, hard time of year, so yeah, it's getting hard to do anything. So is the poll showing?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's see. Okay, great. Let me share the results. Okay. All right. So we got like almost half and half. Some people tried a multi-column, some didn't. And it might not be what rings your bell too. I mean, it just doesn't matter, but just a different layout would be good. Lots of you 6 tried new ideas for flowing your work, whether it's doing one intense subject or maybe a grid layout type of thing. That's great. 2-page spreads, again, 6 if you did, 3 of you haven't tried that yet. They can be challenging for sure. Indexing is still, and that's, you don't obviously have to do it. It's less obvious now, but when you end up, which you will, well down the road, when you have 20 notebooks and you can't find anything, you're going to want to index so you can find things. Because also from a science standpoint, right? I wanted to find when Lucy's warblers, were they starting to show up earlier as climate is changing or later? And so I can go look each year when my entries, when I'm observing Lucy's warblers, when are they nesting, things like that. So from a science standpoint, it's also super helpful. So
I have a question. Hope this doesn't take up too much time, but
Sure.
I don't know how many people here, how long they've been journaling, but I have tried different types of books. I like the smaller pages too, like the 9x6, and then this one's well, I've been using your journal, but a lot of the 9x7s or whatever. But I've also made a stitch sketchbook, and that was really fun, and I like that. And I would take different books. Like if I go see my granddaughter, I'll take one John Muir Law's book with me, or whatever. So I've got all these like starts of books that have started, and I'm like, it's like it's all over, right? So I want to. This is so helpful for me because it's organizing my thoughts in a way. I can do one book wherever I go. It's just, and it really doesn't matter that I don't, but I've got so many different fits and starts. I've actually completed some, but does anybody else do that? Do you do different books for different things?
And it's okay if you do, actually. You can even come up with a little kit. Maybe because honestly, I agree. It's fun to experiment with different sizes or to have like a little mini book. Maybe tie them together with a ribbon and it becomes a set. So you don't feel like you're scattered. It's just maybe today you feel like small, I do agree. I tried to do the 8.5 by 11 size that Jack Laws uses, and I was too worn out by the giant pages. It was just like, that's too much. But he's just fine with maybe putting one thing and then the next day another thing, and do what works for you. Who else experiments with different sizes? I saw Gwen, you like different sizes. Were you nodding? You use different ones?
Yeah, sometimes I do it on purpose and sometimes I do it entirely by accident. And every so this is a terrible admission, but maybe other people have this too, but I just feel like I need to start again, which means that pages and pages get kind of wasted because that was from that time in my life, and or when I identified in such and such a way, but next week I'm identifying a different way and start all over. I have a lot of semi-finished things there. Now you can all feel better because you have 20 semi-finished things.
That's fine. So I guess it comes down to giving yourself permission that that's what you like and that works. If you don't like it, then do try to change. But if you like it, if you like having 5 or 6 different journals, which it didn't work for me,
Oh,
I only wanted to carry one thing, and that's because I'm often walking long distances and just I don't want to carry that much stuff. But if it works for you to have like think of it as a buffet of journals, right? Like today I feel like this size, and today I feel like that. But
you know,
maybe,
one thing that might be important to say, I don't know, but I find that location sometimes determines, like if I'm really trying to drill deep in one location and use it as a sort of a sit spot or something, I don't want other things creeping in there.
exactly. So maybe one way to organize it would be to have a little index thing just to remind you of okay, so I went to the ocean. What journal was it? So maybe you don't have page numbers, you have journal names. I had my ocean journal, or I had my small journal, and this is where I did, Morro Bay or whatever. That way you can at least remember and find, and it feels like you're being a little more organized that way. And that was my problem, is I would not remember which journal I wrote things in. But I'll remember a lot of my journaling ends up in books and things like science books, natural history books. So I do need to find things. I do need to not flail around missing things. So that was yeah, Robin.
So do you ever use a computer for indexing then? I mean, then you can kind of reorganize it based like in Excel or something like that, or a database program of
Sure,
some
you could
kind.
definitely, if that's more your thing, for sure. I don't because I like my analog
Yeah.
way. However, it's not portable. It's in Tucson. I'm not gonna
Mhm.
haul my index set up here. If it was digital, I'd have it, wouldn't I?
Right there on your thumb drive, right? Yeah,
So nothing's perfect.
yeah. You just mentioned that you were putting it into books, that things were going into texts, actual journal articles or this or
Yeah,
that.
data.
Seemed
So
like,
the data needed to be accessible, or the drawings, or what have you.
Mhm.
Also, my husband's always asking for my index because he writes a lot of articles for magazines, and so it'll be about, so like on the Botswana, he'll be like, what was the name of that campsite? And I'm like, yeah, that's
Oh,
in my
yeah.
journal. And
Yeah.
so I charge him for it.
Very good.
So any other ideas, questions? Did everyone get a chance to, let's see, look at the Padlet? I want to, if you didn't, where is, I think I can just share my screen. Hold on. I have too many things open. Hold on. Mail just how funny. Desktop, there it is. Okay. So there we go. Padlet. So here, check out these. I wanted to share. Jill came up with this super fun way of diagramming with this really fun kind of metaphor thing going on, using a barred owl and its different faces to approximate moon faces, which I
Oh,
thought
I
was
see it.
so
Okay.
fun. You didn't see this, and so I wanted to call that out for sure because that was just too much fun. Well done, Jill.
I just want to add that
Yeah.
I realized I was inspired to do this by Tina's journal,
Okay, which
shows the value of collaborating. She did something about phases of the moon.
let's look.
So I got very curious about phases of the moon because of her journal.
Okay,
I think it was the earlier week. I don't remember. Maybe she knows
Yeah,
where
it
it
was
is.
the first or second week. It's true.
let's
And I got, like Jill said, I did get fascinated with it, and I do it every day now. It's part of my data, but But I love what you did, Jill. Everybody just, it's
Oh,
very
thank you.
fascinating, very fun. Yeah.
That
I'm
I
not
feel like
finding
you're
it.
a collaborator on that.
I'm not finding it. I remember it. I'm just not finding it. One of the drawbacks of Padlet is that we're not. Oh, is this? No, that's Jean. Jither's to Moon. Oh, that was beautiful. Well, you'll have to all go back in and.
I can tell you the date, and so we can figure
Okay.
out, because I've got it in this book.
Okay,
We can
perfect.
figure out what let's see here. That was back
Okay.
in, it had to be in November.
I bet it was session 3.
That's what I haven't. I think.
I should have it right here on my page. Oh, here it is. It was
There we are.
November 21st. So whatever,
Yeah,
Is this
session
it
3.
here?
session 3. Yep,
Is that it?
that's it.
Yay. So great. I like that. So getting ideas from other people is wonderful. That's a
Yeah.
fantastic way to expand your views and ideas. So
And it just made me more aware every night that it's clear here in Washington, that to look up, and that's what I've done. And by really discovering, which I'm still discovering, a lot about the moon phases and why they're called waxing and waning in the first quarter and so on. And when I was in Utah, I did go to Utah the 1st of December, same thing. It's always clear there, right? So it's just so pretty to look up, remind yourself to look up in these dark days that we're having.
Yes, exactly. Here's another example of mapping that is really quick and easy to do. So those of you who are maybe intimidated by mapping, here was a very simple route map, and with the pullouts of the different subjects, I thought worked really well as well. So if you're intimidated by mapping, that's a fun way to do it. And then, yeah, Jill, you were on a roll. Tell us about your idea for doing the bird heads with the coloration. I just love that.
Well, at the bottom of the middle page, it says homage to Charlie Harper. If you know his work, he calls it.
No, we don't. I don't.
Oh, Google Charlie Harper. He's
Mhm.
deceased now, but he calls his stuff minimal realism.
Okay.
And so I just could not think about trying to draw all these birds. It would be way too difficult, but I found something to make circles and then just did a little coloration. Yeah, I love his stuff. It's very fun.
Just
So,
love it. And
yeah,
this
and getting
Right. Okay.
an idea from somebody else.
exactly. And now I think all of us are thinking, how can I use this? I love, your tallying. I got a really complete vision scientifically and artistically of your yard, and everything that's going on is so fun. I liked your questions and how you were, the answer that you thought wasn't the answer that it was. And so that's kind of the essence of nature journaling, is having fun with all this too.
This was the benefit of a snow day. We had a snowstorm and we're not going anywhere. So I sat and watched the feeder.
How fun. I love it. So I just wanted to, if those of you who didn't have time to go look at Padlet, just wanted to share that. So stopping the share. So one final thing I'm going to share visually, and then we'll kind of have last thoughts and where we go from here. But let's look at this last thought, because I really like this visual here. Okay. This is actually a it's a trick visual, but we're going to read this on the left. And yes, we talk about how our nature journaling is not about art, but let's just, when we read this, think nature journaling as well. So art is pointless. You have to go out and get an actual job and make a living. You can't just let the rest of your life be a joke, a failure. You will end up a starving artist. Contribute to society instead of wasting time. You're worthless. This is a wonderful art installation at a library, and I need to get the location. Here's how we actually read it. Art is pointless without passion. You have to go out and create art. Get an actual job doing what you love and make a living by being yourself. You can't just let other people define the rest of your life and say you will be a joke, a failure. Follow your heart. You will end up happy and free, not a starving artist. Love your art and contribute to society by inspiring people instead of wasting time letting others tell you you're worthless. You can change the world.
That's cool.
Isn't that cool?
That's very cool.
This is a column in an art installation. So you stand at the corner of it. And, we can say this about journaling as well, to don't let other expectations stop you. Don't let expectations, either your own or other people's, don't measure yourself. Really embrace what you're doing. Love what you're doing. You inspire people by journaling. Let people see your work. I will keep pushing you on that. Don't hide your work. Share it. Let people watch you sketch, because it inspires people not just to journal, but to pay attention to nature and love nature. And that is a major, major important part of nature journaling, is using it to appreciate nature. And when that time comes to vote for that referendum to save that wildlife refuge or this wetland or some forest that you love, then that can inspire other people too. I've seen people use their journal pages to save nature too, and inspiring other people. What are you doing? I'm nature journaling. Why? Because nature's amazing and it makes me happy and it relaxes me in this incredibly ridiculous world we're in right now. I can't imagine what it would be like to be a teenager right now looking at the future. Seriously. So the more we can share this and help people see that there's more to life out there. So I hope you all will keep working on this and continuing to love it. I'm going to check in with you in 6 months. We're going to have another Zoom in 6 months, just because we want to see how everybody's doing and share some pages. Keep using the Padlet. It's not the perfect platform, but at least it isn't social media. And eventually I'll have that on my website, something a little more easily used, visually easily used. And but keep sharing. So
we can still use the Padlet and see everyone's
permanent. Yeah, it's not going to go.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's a good way to communicate and to see more art.
Yeah, and their notifications just improved, so you can set up your notifications to get emails instead of the pings, which never work for me because those go away and I have too many things going on. So emails, you can set up notifications, so when someone posts something new, you'll get a notification. So finally added that. Any final thoughts from anyone? Just how was your journey?
It's wonderful.
It was.
Yeah.
I hope you do another similar class.
I
For
loved it immensely.
oh, good. What do you mean, Jean? Similar?
Like your other book, possibly?
I am. I'm working on one for the Master of Field Arts. It'll be a little different because that was a little more. That's more focused on becoming a naturalist. So I definitely can do one with that. We'll be doing one with that sometime in 2023. So
great.
Good. Well, I really had fun. You guys are the stalwarts who came through. There were 25 people signed up, and
Oh, wow.
a whole bunch of folks never came.
I just wanted to comment about the book because I've had this book for a year and a half, but I hadn't
Right.
structured myself to work through it. And
Yeah.
that's what I find the value in this class is being
Kind of making you, it's
participating.
like, oh crap, I have to go.
Yeah.
Well, also though, you understand more when you work through it with other fellow colleagues here, like, and then understanding what you're trying to write, because it is, there's depth to it that's not easy to understand on your own if you don't have some context to, what these things are about. And I just feel like it's helped us all become better nature journalers. So thank you.
And
For
so
sure.
fun to see everyone's interpretation of it, right? Then you see there is no one way to do it. Just doesn't have to be. So, and you can get so many fun ideas. I wrote down a lot of ideas from you guys. I'm like, oh, I just love these ideas. Never stop, learning and changing, and that's fine. And there's no one way to do it. The only way to do it, the only bad way to do it is not to do it. The only bad journal page is the one you didn't do.
The opening of week 8, that paragraph that was from on vital reserves, the energies of men in the gospel of relaxation, that part that she wrote about don't overthink it.
Yeah.
That spoke to me so much, because I think I really, besides having busy Christmas time and I'm with family and all this stuff, it's kind of hard to, pull away sometimes. It was easy because I was getting a little intimidated and I was overthinking it, like the mapping and all that. I couldn't imagine how I was going to do it. How was I going to lay it on the page? And I had it in my head. How am I going to do this and that? And it never got done. And
Yep.
I overthought it to death. And it didn't happen.
Once you get one out of the way, it becomes easier. And there's so much more to the book because we can keep going back to it.
Yeah,
and
right.
really digging into what we didn't get the first time. That's what I think about this book. It's not one I'm just going to put away. It's one I can always refer back to. So I love it.
Good. So glad.
The end notes are great too. Love the end notes.
Thank you I am very aware that when people drop information, it's like, no, we need to tell you where to find the details. I love going into the details. Because once you start learning all this stuff, like Charlie Harper, now I'm going to go and research that. So the more you learn, the more your brain just loves it. So fantastic.
Would you send us a picture of the snow around your cabin?
Oh, sure. I will be posting that shortly. We did last night. We walked up to the river at it was minus 17, and they have the community decorated 10 trees that are living trees, and so you got to vote on your favorite decorated tree, and they had hot chocolate, and it was really fun. So I'll post some pictures of that and what it looks like.
Did you get to see any of the aurora borealis?
It has been very low activity lately, which is a bummer. We haven't seen it yet. Every time there was high activity, it was cloudy. But we will soon, for sure. We're planning to drive out of town there's loads of websites that show you when it's happening, so you're like, run, and you go and you see it. So I'm excited to see it. Apparently you can sometimes hear it. Did you know that?
Yes, I've heard it before, and it's amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
What's it sound like?
It's more like a warbly sound, like, ooh.
Like radio waves.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah.
Can you imagine what that was like for early people?
No.
It had to be so magical.
Like being visited by a god, by the goddesses or whatever. It just
sure
would be super scary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just gonna commit to once a week posting at least one thing on this Padlet, just to make sure
Okay.
I get on there and see other people, and I hope.
Okay, we'll
will join
remind
me.
folks occasionally. I'll come on and say, "How are you doing?" They'll keep sharing, because
Yeah.
this is your next 5, 6, 8 months are kind of critical for making this a practice. It's easy to set it aside now. Oh, I'm done. And then 5 weeks, 2 months, 3 months go by and you've forgotten. Especially if you want to learn to draw and do watercolor, you've got to do it regularly. That was my experience. Is when I set it aside, I lost all my skills. The more when I go on these trips like a month or more and I can draw every day, it's amazing how much quicker and more fluid I get and much better at what I do. But if I set it aside, even with the experience I have, it gets rusty.
Isn't the Wild Wonder Nature Journal class coming up?
The Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference will be in September of 2023.
September.
And
Okay.
I'll drop a little hint here. Keep your eye out. There's going to be in midsummer, like end of July, we're going to do our first live event in California. Since this first live event since COVID. So we're going to continue.
Oh, or you can actually go there.
Yes, live in
That
person.
would be awesome.
Oh,
Yeah. But I think you can also buy a ticket to Wild Wonder post. You can.
Yes, so we're still selling right now. You can, I think it's only, gosh, I think it's $40 or something, 45 to get. It's 30 classes. Or
I did it this year, zoomed it, but I now can go back and really go into them. And I spent the whole weekend going to the classes, and it's like, gotta go see that one again. I want to hear what they said. It's really great because you can do it at your leisure then if you buy that ticket. And I don't think it's more than $60 for sure. I don't
no,
think
it's
that much.
really cheap. Here's the website for it. Thanks for the reminder on that. And get on the mailing list because it's now part of its own foundation. It's a nonprofit. We're launching all sorts of new programs in 2023 and very affordable. And yeah, the online conference is permanent now, but it's not till September this time. It just works better. And then we're going to have lots of little things too. So thanks for that reminder. But yeah, currently you can still get the 2022 recordings.
okay, that's what I was thinking.
You'll have access till April.
Oh, and you only have access until April, or once you buy it, you get it all the time?
No, it ends. So if you buy the live ticket, you get access till April. And the recordings, yeah, we just have to end it at a certain point because we actually end up, I think we're gonna have to portage them over to another source eventually. So okay, well, everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I'm always available for questions and help. Always.
Very good.
Good.
Yes.
Well, happy
Bye, everybody.
Christmas. Have a wonderful holiday. Enjoy. Stay warm. I'll post some snow pictures.
That would
Happy
be great.
holidays.
Happy
Happy-
holidays.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Thank you.